Welcome to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilssen. We feature top entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the world, those who bring a global mindset and a unique perspective to their life and business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm David Nilssen, and thanks for listening to The Future is Borderless. I am the host of the show, and here we connect with amazing entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the world who have what I call a borderless mindset. And I invite them on so that they can, sort of help bring visibility to new ideas, innovations, and even best practices, things that can be applied to both your personal and professional life, and all of which should help us grow in a rapidly changing world. Now, this episode is brought to you by Doxa Talent. Doxa Talent helps business leaders to find full-time, dedicated, highly skilled workers from around the world. And this includes everything from accountants, executive assistants, sales development reps, software engineers, and many other roles. And as a result of building an offshore capability, companies can scale faster, increase margin, and improve culture. To learn more about Doxa, visit doxatalent.com. All right. Well, I generally interview people who I'm far less familiar with and outside of our businesses. However, today I've invited Lauren Hoover onto the show. Now, Lauren is a co-founder and chief of staff at Doxa. Before Doxa, she was the chief of staff at Guidant Financial, which has helped about 30,000 entrepreneurs find capital to start or buy a business. Early in her career, Lauren was the deputy chief of staff for the head of the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Representatives. So she is a powerhouse and world-class in bringing out the best in leaders. I should also note that she studied business management, marketing, and related support services at Kansas State University. Go Wildcats. So Lauren, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's great to be here.
All right. So this should be a lot of fun. Obviously we work together. So, I'm hoping we'll just have sort of a good conversation. When I did the introduction, I read the sponsorship message. Doxa Talent is obviously our sponsor. And in Doxa, we help leaders find offshore talent. And as a result, we help them scale faster and increase margin. And I talked about all the different roles. There's lots of those that we help people fill, from social media managers to attorneys and even marketing automation specialists. But you helped build a very specific competency inside of Doxa around virtual assistants or VAs. And I remember the day that you said that you wanted to build that program. For me, it was a no-brainer. But VAs might be the most overused term I can think of in outsourcing. So I wonder if you could just start by sharing a little bit about, in our nomenclature, what is a virtual assistant or VA, and why did you want to build this capability with us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we really think about VA. I think a lot of people think it's some sort of unicorn role. And I think that can, set you up for disappointment if you don't have the right expectations. And so we really think about a VA as, a couple different things. This is someone who can, help you manage an inbox and calendar management. They need to be able to do some light sales development, maybe some marketing assistant. This is someone who can support an executive in, travel booking, expense reimbursements, things like that. A little bit of social media. We like to think about it as, some light content creation, a little bit of customer service in their background, as well as somebody who can probably, manage data, documents, processes, research, things like that. So we think about it a little bit more defined in those types of terms. But really it's somebody who can, you can take things and delegate to them. That's the number one thing that we're looking for.
Yeah, it's funny, I think anybody that I won't even say owns a business. I think it's just leaders in general, right? There's so many things that they're responsible for, and it's easy to get mired in the details and not really focus on the things that are most important, those random tasks that come up. And the VAs, at least in our experience together, really great at sort of taking those things off their plate and allowing them to focus on the things that they need to be doing that are going to advance the ball faster down the field, for lack of a better term.
Right. And it's different for everybody. It's not prescriptive. You might need somebody who can manage 90% of X and 10% of Y. So we like to think about it more as, holistically looking at what somebody needs, not just, plugging somebody with a certain set of capabilities into that role.
Yeah. Can you maybe speak to, in your bio, I talked a little bit about how early in your career, you started as the deputy chief of staff for the head of the Ways and Means Committee in Washington, D.C. That had to have been an intense role. And then, of course, moved into corporate America at Guidant. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and sort of how that's prepared you to sort of, build this program and really identify best-in-class talent?
Definitely. So I did. I started in Congress right out of college, and I like to think of that as sort of baptism by fire entering the workforce because it was so intense on all fronts. And, really, I started out as our staff assistant. So I joined a congressional office, my congressional office, and I was the staff assistant. And after a couple months of doing that, I think maybe 4 or 5 months, I decided I was ready to move on from, talking to constituents and answering phone calls and things like that. And at the time, there's a couple different tracks you can take in a congressional office. It's, either sort of the legislative path or, a leadership path. And I sort of looked around at our office and said, well, there's probably not going to be a legislative opportunity here. I don't see any of my coworkers moving out of these roles. And so what does that look like for me? And so really sort of opportunistically, just because I was, bored in my role at the time, I looked to the role of a scheduler. And so we had a scheduler in the office. She basically ran the office. She managed the congresswoman's time, things like that. And she happened to be departing. And so I just looked at that role and thought, well, this is my opportunity. I have to take what I can get. And, this is what's in front of me. And so I sort of somehow managed to talk myself into that role with 5 months of experience in the workforce. And it was a really natural fit for me. It's sort of, managing the office and managing, really important things in a strategic way felt like a natural fit for me. And so that was sort of a big aha moment for me when I realized that this is a different path that I could take that was really aligned with my skills and my natural abilities and things like that. And so, I grew in that role from sort of her scheduler, or as we would call it, an executive assistant in corporate America, to our director of finance and operations, our deputy chief of staff. And, I've sort of taken those learnings and translated them to what we've built at Doxa. And that is this ability to grow from that staff assistant, administrative assistant, whatever you want to call it, grow from that role to more of a senior leadership position with an organization or an executive or the government, whatever you want to call it. And that's sort of how I've built the foundations of our program. And it's different because, there are concepts in there like, this ability to manage up. And, really, what are those things that you need to be doing to advance yourself in that type of role to continue to really add value to an organization and, learn new skills and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important distinction. I remember the first time I started working with VAs, and this was before Doxa, what I found is that I had to spend a lot of time thinking about what to help them work on. And it just created more management for me, which I needed just the opposite. I needed less of that. And so I think it's just an important distinction to bring up your background there because, when you say scheduler, some people won't actually know what that means, but this is not a receptionist who is taking orders from people that are inbound, that are calling inbound, but rather managing this person's calendar, making sure they know where they need to be, what they need to be working on, who they need to talk to. Very, very different. And also important to note that you also were the director of finance and operations in that office as well. So you were doing what a lot of the entrepreneurs and business leaders that we serve really need support from. So
100%. And even my role, thinking back on it, it's tough to describe. I was involved in literally everything from, like you said, managing our budget, operating our office, having input on legislation, writing press releases occasionally. I was meeting with key people, Fortune 500 CEOs and things like that. In addition to, like you said, literally managing the congresswoman's life. And so, that's a lot of responsibility. I can't tell you how many times I heard her tell people, oh, I don't know about that. You have to talk to Lauren. That's above my pay grade. And obviously it wasn't above her pay grade, but you understand the sentiment. And so it was an enormous opportunity for, me to take on such a role and at such a young age and, learn so much from that and translate it to what we're seeing today.
Yeah. Well, good. I wanted to start there because I think it's really important to know your background, because you're the one that's sort of hand selecting and training these VAs as we're sort of bringing them on board. And I think it's really relevant. So I want to talk about the way that people use VAs today. You talked at the very beginning about some of the types of tasks that can be given to a VA, but I'd love to understand because a VA can't actually do everything in an office. I mean, it's not uncommon somebody comes to us and says, I want an accountant who's also a social media manager who can do a little HTML. Oh, and they really need to be great as a scheduler, for lack of a better term. That obviously is the unicorn that we hear people sort of promote in the industry. But what are some of the most common use cases that you see for VAs today?
I think that, like I said, I think it's different for everybody. And I think that it's important to know what you want. And so you can have that tailored experience. And what I really mean by that is, maybe an organization needs some leverage on their marketing team. Maybe they're looking for that boost and they need somebody who can do digital marketing and things like that. But I think some of the most successful pairings, for lack of a better word, that I see today are with CEOs and senior executive assistants. And I'll give you an example. So we had a client who came to us and was looking for really great EA talent who could really support him in all of those key areas. And that's really heavy sort of life support, work and personal, calendar management, sort of arranging things. But he was on the precipice at the time of franchising his business. And so he was looking for someone who could do that. And so what we did is we found someone who matched his profile, somebody who was truly capable of doing some of these things, of being a really strategic partner, of taking huge things off of his plate so he could focus in other areas. And she happened to have a background in franchising. And so I think those situations are where we see the most leverage. And that's a lot of what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how you think that pairing that you talked about. I mean, when we are looking for virtual assistants, there's a lot of people out there that say they're a virtual assistant. So we get a tremendous number of applicants. But how do you know who to prioritize in that process? I mean, what are some of the non-negotiable things or skills that you're looking for?
So you're right. A virtual assistant means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so one thing we did at Doxa was to get really clear on, what we considered a virtual assistant. What does that background look like? What does your experience and your education look like? Those types of things. All those fundamentals are really important. But something that we use is a behavioral assessment. And I found that that's a really good way to sort of, separate the top performers and people who might not necessarily be, set up to be successful in this type of role. And so we use that in a couple different ways. First, we use it as a filtering tool. So before we even spend time interviewing a candidate, we have them take that assessment. And we've built parameters around, what characteristics we know someone needs. And we use that as a filtering tool. So we're pulling out people who don't necessarily fit in with that. And so that's a way that we use it on the front end. And we also use it, just really to pinpoint if an individual's naturally set up to be, proactive, if they have an attention to detail, they have a strong follow through, do they have an ability to think logically and rationally, things like that. And so that helps us, identify who we know can really perform well in this type of role. And the last way that we use it is really more of a matchmaking tool. And that is, when we have a client come to us, we also have them take this assessment so we can understand, how they naturally work, who they naturally are, and we can make a really intelligent pairing for them. And I think that third area, sort of cascades in terms of importance, but that third one, when we're really using it as a matchmaking tool, is where we see a lot of success.
Yeah, let me go back actually and just reiterate a couple things. So you were saying that, if you get 100 resumes, let's say today, you ask them to take the assessment. The assessment takes like 10 minutes and they can
Right.
take it in their native language, which most of them it's English, but a lot of them are native Tagalog speakers or so on. If they're not willing to invest 10 minutes, they may not be that serious about the role. But if they do, and we find the skill set that we need, then that's sort of the mode that moves in the next stage. But the third one is actually really critical. And I'll just use myself as an example. So in this behavioral assessment, what you'll find is I'm a pretty extreme personality, but attention to detail is not necessarily a great strength. It's something I can do, but it takes a lot of energy for me to be able to do that. So, if Lauren, you're working with me and you were looking to find someone to support me, you'd be looking for somebody who has that real extreme attention to detail, but also enough drive that they can keep up. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just an example for those of you that are listening. And I'll just make an offer for those of you that are listening to podcasts right now. If you're interested in understanding a little bit more about your own personal profile, would be happy to run that. So you sort of get a sense for what the sort of perfect VA might look like in complement to you. Okay. So Lauren, let's pretend we've gone through the process. You've found a good applicant and that person matches really well with a particular client. Is there something that you think is critical, maybe something that you do with your clients to ensure that the VA is successful long-term, that match actually works from the get-go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, when we have to look at holistically in terms of, who this candidate is, what their background is, their experience, and also where they want to grow or where they want to go in their future. And a big part of that is making sure that we're hiring people who want to learn and grow with an organization. We're very, very upfront about the fact that, we think of this as a long-term career for you to learn and grow in your role and continue to add value in different ways. And so I think when we present it that way, it sort of attracts the right talent to us in the first place. But, like you alluded to, matching people in the right way in that behavioral assessment, I think that is a really good foundation to start with. But things that we prioritize in our training process are things, beyond tools and software. We focus on a lot of character building, how to build trust with someone in a virtual world, how to really set yourself up to build that type of relationship. And also things like, how to be a leader assistant, how to, master the art of managing up. And I think that, when you train somebody in that area, if they're naturally capable of it, they're going to, continue to find ways to add to that relationship, and they're going to improve on the skills that they need to get there. And so I think that's a little bit of a differentiator that helps set our, pairings up for better success long term.
Yeah, I love this. I see there's a lot of VA companies out there, and what they actually sell is not to get people excited about it is they don't actually talk really about the VA, but they talk about all these tools and widgets that people can use that get them excited. It's like selling all the sizzle without the steak. So I love that you've sort of developed this character building, managing up skills that will help them be successful long term, because there's always going to be the next tool. Speaking of which, when you think about the tools and sort of things that people are learning as they're working with other CEOs, can you talk a little bit about how you help people sort of share what they're learning along the journey within the Doxa's EA program?
You mean with our VIP assistants?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like if I was a VIP assistant and I learned something interesting, can you talk a little bit about how I might share that with the other community and benefit the other customers per se?
That's great. And it also highlights a really good point in that, we aren't just a company where somebody comes to you and they hire a VA for a certain number of hours and you get your tasks done. We really have sort of a fully dedicated, full community of support. And so this program that we've built within Doxa, we call it VIP Assist. We landed on VIP because we felt like, that really reflected the fact that people are the heart of the business. That's why we call our team VIPs. And so our team they've all gone through a training program. They're all part of batches. And we've built this online community within just simply Microsoft Teams, where we can, interact, share training, share learnings, ask questions, get answers, get feedback. I mean, the opportunities are endless. And so I think there's sort of a built-in group of people there to support our team and to give them some leverage and to make them feel more confident as well.
Yeah. And it's a benefit for all customers. So if I learn something, I can share it with this community, and then it has the ability to impact others, both the VIPAs, but the people that they serve. One thing that I've heard a lot as I've been talking to people who are interested in offshoring, you can tell that they really have this need. They don't have the time. They're concerned about their life is imploding due to being too busy, but they're not really sure what they can let go of. So how would you address this with someone who's saying like, hey, I'm really busy, I need help, but I just don't know what to delegate?
So there's this little exercise that I know you've used before that I use with people all the time. And it's the simple exercise of creating a couple lists for yourself. In the first column, what are the things that you love doing that really add value to your organization? What are the things that only you are good at? Then, what's the list of things that you or your team should be doing that you don't have time for? Competitive research, data scraping, things like that. And then, what are the things that you are doing or your team is doing that you really shouldn't be? It's not adding value. It's administrative. It's just not critical for you to be doing that. And so I think when we start with that list, people can sort of visually see, oh, I actually only like doing 4 or 5 things, and that's where I add value. All of these other things are either missed opportunity or it's just, spending time, probably very expensive time, on things that you don't need to be doing. And so we start there. And then if we can look at that and sort of help a client understand what are you really looking for, then we have all these tools on the back end to say, okay, great. Well, we can, we have a playbook for X. We can help you train this person how to do that and things like that. So it sort of takes the, looking at it in terms of, okay, where do we really need to start? And then bringing in the tactical pieces like the tools and some of those things that really make a difference.
Yeah, it's funny. I always tell people when I did mine originally, I remember I loved, I love to be involved in the strategic planning. I want to be coaching executives. There's the corporate development and business development aspects, and even, the sort of what I call the external evangelism, the public relations, the public speaking, things like that. Things that we always talked about that we couldn't really get to were like, graphic design, little personal items like for social badges and so on and so forth, data scraping. You mentioned that a minute ago. And then there was all this other stuff that needs to be done, like email and scheduling, travel booking, note taking from meetings, follow up, anniversaries, birthdays, all that kind of stuff. And it just takes so much time to manage that stuff. That can be easily delegated to somebody else. So yeah, I think that exercise is one that I think most people should spend some time really just doing an inventory of where am I really spending my time and what's really adding value that I am only uniquely qualified to do.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about mistakes that you're seeing. Like when somebody says like, hey, I need a VA, and they jump in with 2 feet, what are you seeing that, and this may be not even specific to just VAs, but where can people do better to make sure the relationship is set up for success?
So I think, thinking like, oh, there's one top mistake is probably your first mistake. So, there are many ways it can sort of go wrong, from, hiring the wrong person, not investing in onboarding, and, not defining your role. I think all of those things are really important. But what I see as, the biggest mistake in terms of hiring a VA or an EA in particular is not investing in a full-time dedicated resource. And I'll tell you why. So, first of all, when we look at the talent out there, most people, certainly the people we target, it's top talent. And they want to be in a position where they can really sink their teeth in. They have an opportunity to be a partner to someone and to really grow in that type of role. And so on one hand, it really helps us recruit better talent when we can say, hey, we have a great career opportunity for you, not a position where you have to juggle 7 clients and work 7 days a week. And so it really helps us attract the best talent. And, on the freelancing side, say you're not even just freelancing, say you're looking for a VA, and, you can either go the freelancing route, try to find someone yourself, or if you work with a company, a lot of them do have most of their team members work on a fractional basis. And so whether that's, a client who's buying a certain number of hours of work per month or a part-time resource, the bottom line is that when someone is juggling multiple clients, you're never going to be the priority. And so if you want to just, offload a few tasks, sure, that can work out. But if you're in a position where you really want this person to grow with you and to, continue to, like I said earlier, add value to an organization and things like that, it needs to be somebody who has the time to do that, who can, spot those opportunities, who can proactively take things off your plate. And that person is not going to be someone who's juggling multiple people.
Yeah. And, for some clients, I guess it's fair to say for some people that may actually be what they want, which is what we've always talked about as task dispatching, right? Like,
right.
I just need you to do these few things. But, the reality is that when someone is, this is how VA companies improve their margin, right? Is they sell batches of hours that you're likely to underutilize because it's not a full-time resource. And where we've seen great success, I've seen this. Certainly, I have a full-time VA, but I've seen companies who have effectively taken on one VA and shared that person amongst, one or two or three executives. That can actually be done fairly effectively as well, right?
Totally, you bet. I think, the distinction comes when you're sort of having to fight for yourself among these other clients, and really puts you in a position where you're not a priority. And in fact, when you think about, I know some people have this question of, oh, well, how am I going to fill this person's time? First of all, we can help you work through that. But second of all, that's the first thing that I ask our candidates in an interview is, what are you going to do if you find yourself having free time? And so when you start at that point and people can articulate that, then okay, this is a person who's going to start with a company and, maybe they have a little free time. They realize, oh, Joan in accounting is drowning. I have experience there. Maybe I can throw my hat in, help her with a project, things like that. So that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah. I just realized a few minutes ago that you've used the term EA and VA, and we haven't really talked about that. I think in the world of outsourcing or offshoring, people say virtual assistant as if it's the catch-all for everything. But you actually have designed some tiers inside the program. Will you speak to that for just a second?
I have actually, under sort of the VIP Assist banner. We like to think about it in a couple different ways, actually. And that is, sort of tiers. An administrative assistant is sort of more of a, not entry level, but they might have a couple years experience in an administrative type role. And then we sort of jump up to a virtual assistant. And that's typically where we see the most variety in terms of experience, background, things like that. And that gives us a little bit more wiggle room to construct a job that's not, super rigid. And then, we think of it in terms of our EAs. And so these are more senior professionals who have had demonstrated experience working for an executive. And so, there's a little bit of distinction in between there. And that, say you're, an entrepreneur, a virtual assistant might be right for you because you need help with a little bit of email management and calendar management and a little bit of social media design. And maybe they can help you with some invoicing and sort of, picking and choosing from a little bit of those different areas. But 3 years down the line, you're going to want more of a senior executive assistant who can really be an extension of you and, be a part of those projects and making those decisions and things like that. So we sort of have built a path within our program to help people grow into those roles.
Yeah, that's great. So let me actually say that back because we've never really talked about it in this regard, but the administrative assistant, fair to say this is really a focused administrative professional, really back office, think about that. The virtual assistant is sort of like the Swiss Army knife. And I think that's why you said, hey, look, for our entrepreneur clients, their chief cook and bottle washer, they need support across a lot of different disciplines. Someone who's got, sort of broad experiences. And then the EA is really for that like focused executive support, someone who's got real skills managing up and help, sort of driving that on that executive or entrepreneur. Is that right?
100%.
Love it. Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about time zone for a second, because one of the more common questions that come up, Doxa serves clients across the US, UK, Canada, Australia. Do you want to share a little bit about how the time zone affects, how we work with the different time zones?
Sure. So, we actually hire all of our team members proactively. So our team members that are going through this VIP Assist program, as we call it, they're going through sort of a Doxa boot camp. And so they're hired under a US schedule. So they sort of get used to it. And it's, like I said, something we hire to, but we cater to pretty much any time zone. And so that's part of our hiring process. Our team members who are applying, they know right off the bat that they're signing up for, potentially an overnight position. And it's something that's really common in the Philippines, just because, so much of their GDP is this BPO or this offshoring, industry. And so it's really common for people to work at night shift. And so, we have team members who they go through our training on a traditional US schedule, and then they might transition to, whatever schedule their client prefers, their times in that they're working in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, we always tell our clients that as you alluded to, the Philippines outsourcing world sort of runs 24/7. It's so important to their economy. It has to. And the government has made massive investments in infrastructure and technology and education to ensure that continues to be really important to them. But something that's really important to our organization, we always say we're the offshoring solution for the conscious capitalist because we pay very well in the market. We want to lift up those communities. We provide benefits, and they're working with state-of-the-art technology. But we also, where it's appropriate, like to see people work what we call a split shift. So someone can actually work direct oversight or overlap with somebody in just about any time zone. But where it's appropriate, sometimes we can modify the schedule so there's maybe 3 to 4 hours of overlap that allows somebody to have the time that they need to collaborate, but also focus time and still not have to work throughout the entire evening. And I see that happen, probably half the time. Is that right?
Definitely. And in fact, as you know, I'm doing all of our final interviews. So I've interviewed literally hundreds of candidates. And something that surprised me a little bit that I continue to see is that it's actually a big opportunity for women, simply because, typically, they might not be able to work a traditional day shift. And I've talked to many women who are able to work that night shift. They can spend time with their kids in the evening and put them to bed. They also get to wake up with their kids. And so it puts them in a position where, number one, they can still take care of their family, which is really important in Filipino culture, but also so they can earn, and develop a career for themselves, while also, doing it in a sustainable way for their family. And so that was something that sort of surprised me. That's another benefit of that, actually.
Love it. Let's talk about security for a second. Whether someone's an administrative professional, a VA, or an executive assistant, as you talked about a few minutes ago, a lot of them access to client information, sometimes, what we call PII or personally identifiable information, or even email. What are some of the steps that we've taken to make sure that we can be that flexible employer working with remote clients, but do it in a way that doesn't compromise data or security?
Right. So one thing we do is we sort of own the whole setup. And by that, I mean, every new VIP at Doxa receives, a Doxa laptop, a setup with their monitors, their headphones, everything like that. And so that enables us to own and manage the equipment. So we, have mobile device management. We have complete oversight over what that machine is doing at all times. And so that gives us sort of a foundation of security that you don't see everywhere. And so we have that built in. But we also, if you talk about someone who's dealing with personal information and things like that, we use certain tools and softwares to help people manage that. And so that would be things like LastPass, that enable you to save your passwords and share them with somebody in a way that it can't be compromised. And so I think when you, sort of have that overarching security blanket that we have, and then you add in some of those tools and things like that, it really makes people feel comfortable. And there's, sort of that built-in layer of trust and security.
Yeah, I remember watching a an online webinar around virtual assistants one time, and somebody asked the question, what do you do about security? And the person that was providing said, well, I mean, you could send them an encrypted laptop. I'm not even sure what they meant by that, but it showed that there was just a little bit less thought behind how that's all put together. Always important for us to make sure we've got it's our hardware. We've got the remote management tools that help us turn on and off computers. We can determine what can be downloaded versus not to a computer. We can spin them up in virtual workspaces. I mean, all that stuff is so important. And then to your point, there's lots of great tools out there that also allow the sharing of information without divulging too much that might compromise the client. Let's talk about cost for a second. It's not uncommon for me to see things on the internet say like you can get a VA for $5 an hour or sometimes even cheaper. How do you address this, and what are you seeing in the market today?
Well, I think just like anything, you get what you pay for. And if you're paying someone $5 an hour to be your VA, you're giving up a lot. So if that's a freelancer, it might be, you don't have insight into their background or their experience. You don't have control over what they're doing with your information. You don't have, you're not a priority. I mean, like I said before, if you're not in a position where this person, is prioritizing you, if that's the situation, if it's not a dedicated resource, if it's, someone who's just making a couple of bucks. And so I think there's a lot of disadvantages to going with a low cost option. But, ultimately, I think that, it's just being that having that fully dedicated resource can be such a huge benefit. And when you think about it in terms of, what you might pay in the US or in the UK for the same type of resource, it's still quite the difference.
Yeah, it's pretty common, I think, for people in this industry to try and find a young talent that comes at a very, very low cost. And because, they're typically managing behind the scenes, they're not as worried about the turnover either. And so you see a lot of those offers out of the gates. One thing I'll just note, I agree with you, if somebody is getting assistance for $5 an hour, they're either contracting that person or they're not providing benefits, helping them pay their taxes, making sure that their basic human needs are met. And that's something that's, philosophically very important to us, is to make sure that we are not providing labor at the expense of labor, but that everyone wins in the equation.
Totally. And I think there's a certain peace of mind, as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, that comes with knowing that your staff is being taken care of.
Yeah, you can do it cheap, but it's also worth doing right. All right, let's talk about, I guess, really the last question that I have for you for today, at least. Who shouldn't have a VA? We spent a lot of time talking about what is a VA, how it works, what you can delegate, what it might cost. But who do you think should not have a VA?
I think if you truly are struggling with defining what you need, I think that's something that we can help with. I think in most cases I see, if you don't have the time to onboard someone well, that's sort of the determining factor. If you're just willing to take someone and dump a bunch of responsibilities on them, it's unlikely to be a successful relationship long term. So I think, to me, you have to be in a position where you're willing to spend a little bit of time and to get this person set up right. Because when you onboard someone in the right way, it really sets them up to be in a position long term where they can, be proactive or make decisions because they had that information, they know who to go to, they can rely on that, as opposed to just sort of trying to fill in the blanks, frantically behind you.
Yeah, I'd also note, I think there's offshoring has sort of created this new, what I would call openness to offsite work, but it's forcing managers to also shift the way that they manage, right? From management by site, where I can actually physically see you, to management by objective. And I think that is something that somebody really needs to search around as well. I've met a lot of people who want and say that they're someone who can do that, but have not yet fully embraced that. And I think you're going to work with an offshore resource, that's just going to have to be the reality, is that you become more management by objective. So let's talk about just the current state of what I would call the environment today, as more and more companies have, shifted towards offsite work, and this talent shortage that is now literally infecting every business owner I talk to. People are sort of more open to these offshoring alternatives, and it's giving the industry a nice boost. But what would you tell anyone who is thinking about offshoring or getting a virtual assistant, but has just not taken the leap yet?
I think that it's important to do your research. And that's what I always tell people, to understand what's out there, how that might match up to what you're actually looking for, before you go down that path. And I think, having a defined idea of what you're looking for is one of the most critical things. So even if I have someone who comes to me and says, "Oh, I'm looking for an executive assistant," I say, "Great. What do you need them to do?" And so I think that's when you sort of have somebody define what they're really looking for, that can, really help drive the rest of the process. And so if somebody, if somebody doesn't know what they're looking for, I think helping them to define what that looks like and then what it could look like in terms of talent. I think that's what I would tell somebody who is starting to go down this path.
I love it. Yeah, I think so many people, they hear about the VA and they think, oh, that sounds great. So they've now identified a solution and go in search of a problem. But really the idea is to get clear on what's the real root need, and then we can help them solve for that.
Exactly. And let us do the work for you. You don't need to get to that end solution. You need to get to the point where what you need, what leverage can we bring to you? What do you need help with? And we'll fill in the blanks. We'll tell you, what kind of talent we have, what their backgrounds are like, why we target certain types of people, and what all of that looks like on the back end.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave it there. We've been talking to Lauren Hoover, co-founder and chief of staff at Doxa Talent. Lauren, if people want to learn more about you and the VA program that you've helped to develop, where can they go?
You can absolutely go to doxatalent.com, or feel free to shoot me an email directly at lauren.hoover@doxa7.com.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilssen. Be sure to click subscribe to future episodes so you can hear from more top entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And we'll see you again next time.